Vice President of India, Jagdeep Dhankar, is the new warrior of the ruling establishment to take on the judiciary. The Law Minister, Kiren Rijiju, began the war a few months ago, questioning the collegium system. He took umbrage at the striking down of the NJAC Act, NJAC, the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act, by the Supreme Court in 2015. Jagdeep Dhankar joined ranks with Kiren Rijiju in his inaugural address as chairman of the Rajya Sabha. He opened a new front 2 days ago. One wonders why these honorable occupiers of constitutional positions are talking like street urchins, taking on the constitution itself. What do street urchins do? Since they have no power, no social standing, so they shout, berate, vandalize. But as high constitutional functionaries, Rijiju and Dhankar have political power and legitimate authority. They ought not to have shouted as street vandals. They should have got into action mode. After all, the Supreme Court of India, while striking down the NJAC Act, had taken exception to only certain specific provisions incorporated in the Act and had asked the government to get back with a revised Act. The government of India was well within its right to come up with a fresh legislation on the judicial appointments. Instead of doing so, it's indeed astounding that the government is marshalling Rijijus and Dhankars to whine in the public fora. The Vice President opened the other flank 2 days ago at Jaipur at the conference of the presiding officers of the legislature. His rant this time was against the basic structure doctrine set out by the Supreme Court in Kesavananda Bharati case in 1973. How can Supreme Court sit on judgment on an act passed by Parliament? He asked. Mind you, earlier his attack was against the judiciary in the context of annulling one act, the NJAC Act. Now he has broadened the scope. He is now questioning the very idea of judicial review itself. He says, Parliament is supreme. How can a bunch of unelected people sit on judgment of the wisdom of Parliament? What a shame. Why is this gentleman holding the second highest constitutional position in the country making comments that befit ill-educated brats? What a tragedy that the Vice President of India needs a crash course on the Indian Constitution. Will a first-year student of law or even a class 11 student of a school studying Indian Constitution educate our Vice President about the provision of judicial review as integral to our Constitution as devised by the founding fathers of our Constitution? Will someone enlighten our esteemed chairperson of Rajya Sabha that Article 13 itself makes it very clear that any law that took away or infringed upon the fundamental rights of a citizen would be declared void by the Constitutional Court. Our Vice President is taking exception to Kesavananda Bharati judgment of 1973. He should take time off from his ignorant posturings to read up the history of judicial review. In the Golaknath versus State of Punjab case in 1967, 6 years before the Kesavananda Bharati judgment was delivered, the Supreme Court had stated that fundamental rights are so sacrosanct and so transcendental that even a unanimous vote of all members of Parliament would not be allowed to weaken or undermine them. The Apex Court had then pledged to protect fundamental rights from any sinister designs of an authoritarian executive. In the Kesavananda Bharati case, the Supreme Court took upon itself the onerous task of defending the spirit of the Constitution against the repeated assaults of the then Indira Gandhi government on the democratic institutions at a time when Indira Gandhi government was seeking to undermine the judiciary by a series of repugnant, dastardly moves. The Apex Court stood its ground and protected Indian democracy. The current regime is exactly following the footsteps of the Indira government. There is systematic attempt today to weaken the judiciary, the only institution that presents an impediment to an authoritarian establishment, whittling away the democratic institutions. In the 1970s, the Indian democracy was in real danger of facing a certain death. It survived thanks to the courage shown by a majority of the judges of the Apex Court. India in 2020s is exactly in a similar situation as it was in 1970s. There is a concerted attempt to undercut the judiciary so that authoritarian forces can spread wings. The Supreme Court of India must stand guard and bravely face the onslaught of the likes of Kiran Rijijus and Jagdeep Dhankars to protect and defend the Constitution of India.